Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel 876 Awesome, where we discuss content relating to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I'm back with a new video, so let's talk about it. The MCU is interesting and it's great, but it can be puzzling if you're not all caught up. And by caught up I mean watched all the movies and shows and understood everything that happened. But I think that's because of the way Marvel tends to release its movies and shows. So basically, if you haven't watched all the films the MCU has to offer and you want to follow all the events, you can't watch them in the order that they were released, as they're not chronological. If you want to, that's fine, but as I've already mentioned, it can be mind-boggling to try and understand. With 27 movies and counting, the MCU is a vast cinematic universe with stories that span different time periods, timelines, and even galaxies. So that's where I come in. I'll be showing you a different order, arranged by when the events actually happen. I'll only be featuring the Marvel movies and select Marvel TV shows from Disney Plus in this main chronological order. And just to let you know, there will be a few spoilers, so if you want to avoid all of that, skip to the end of the video for a compiled spoiler-free list. So with all of that said, let's get into this. Kicking off this list, we have The Soldier, Captain America, the First Avenger. This is the first film on the list, as these events take place first during World War II, and it's where we see the creation of the super soldier portrayed by Chris Evans, as well as his initial face-off with Hydra and their leader, the Red Skull. The film also introduces the Tesseract, which we later discover is the first Infinity Stone, one of the 6 powerful space gems. Next, we go forward in time to the 90s, where Captain Marvel discovers a community of Skrulls hiding in plain sight on Earth. In Captain Marvel, these events are set in the year 1995. 50 years after the events of Captain America. We see the hero Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, played by Brie Larson, fall to Earth and begin a search for the shape-shifting Skrulls. Her background is also explained, and there's a lot of action to see as we see Carol team up with her friends to take on the big bad aliens. And now, that brings us to Iron Man. It's the very first Marvel movie made, but it's actually the third in chronological order. This was the movie that started it all for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's all about the genius, billionaire, playboy philanthropist Tony Stark, played by none other than Robert Downey Jr. In the film, Stark is captured by a terrorist organization, and the leader wants the latest weapon system designed by Stark himself. However, Stark designed something even more powerful to help himself escape, the very first Iron Man suit. And of course, he then goes on to become a powerful but arrogant superhero. Continuing with Iron Man, we have Iron Man 2. The events of this movie takes place less than a year afterwards, and it picks up where the first one left off. We see Tony Stark struggling with his Iron Man identity being revealed. Also, Tony is back in trouble as the son of a former Stark Industries employee, Ivan Vanko, tries to kill him using his own version of Tony's Iron Man suit technology. This film also introduces fellow Avengers, the Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson, and War Machine, played by Don Cheadle. Now, moving on to the next movie, we have The Incredible Hulk, which was released the same year as the first Iron Man. However, the events of this movie is set in 2011. The Incredible Hulk follows Bruce Banner on the run from the US military and his longtime adversary, General Thunderbolt Ross, while trying to find a cure for his condition, which turns him into the Hulk anytime he gets too angry. After realizing he's not able to control or contain the Hulk, Ross decides to create his own version of the Hulk using another soldier, but he quickly loses control. The Incredible Hulk stars Edward Norton, but Mark Ruffalo replaced him in 2012 and has been the big green man on the big screen ever since. And just to add a quick note, you can technically watch The Incredible Hulk before Iron Man 2. Marvel said that Iron Man 2 and The Incredible Hulk happened around the same time. However, whether this movie counts as part of the MCU is still up for debate. Disney and Marvel say no, but it was very clearly meant to be in the MCU when it was created, due to a post-credit scene involving Tony Stark. And now for the last movie in 2011, and yes, this was a busy year for the MCU. We're on to Thor. Being the god of mischief, Loki, played by Tom Hiddleston, decides to live up to his title and get Thor, portrayed by Chris Hemsworth, to be banished to Earth by his father Odin after deeming him no longer worthy enough to lift his hammer Mjolnir. While on Earth, Thor meets the scientist Jane Foster and learns how to live as a mortal being for a while. And meanwhile on Asgard, Loki finds out more about his past. Eventually, Thor proves himself worthy enough to wield his hammer and returns to Asgard to stop Loki from causing any more trouble once again. Next, we have the finale of the so-called Phase 1 of the MCU, the Avengers. Here, we see all the main heroes introduced, which includes a recently unfrozen Cap, Iron Man who's realizing there's no I in team, a reluctant Banner and Hulk, and Thor who's traveled back to Earth. They all team up to stop Loki armed with the Tesseract and a swarm of aliens invading New York City. They are also joined by Black Widow and her best friend Clint Barton aka Hawkeye. Long story short, a huge battle occurs, destroying most of the city, but eventually ends with Loki being captured and taken back to Asgard. Moving on, we have Iron Man 3. The third and final standalone Iron Man film takes place 6 months after the giant fight in New York City. Tony Stark is struggling with the memories of the battle that took place that nearly killed him. The memories lead him to build an army of Iron Man suits so he can always be prepared. Next movie on the list, we have Thor: The Dark World. And in the movie, we see Thor return to Asgard after the attack on New York City. However, the ancient dark elves that was thought to be extinct return. They're back and they are seeking the Ether, a powerful weapon that is later revealed to be an Infinity Stone. Moving on to the next movie, we have Captain America and the Winter Soldier. And in this movie, Steve is spending his days trying to adjust to present day life while also working for SHIELD, a special government agency. But he finds himself questioning the motive of the organization as he learns more about its plans. And in addition to that, his closest friend returns from the dead and becomes an adversary called the Winter Soldier, played by Sebastian Stan. The film also introduces the Falcon, played by Anthony Mackie. And now, released in the same year, The Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. We can see Peter Quill aka Star-Lord, played by Chris Pratt, steal an Infinity Stone hidden in the ruins of an alien planet. And when he's trying to find a buyer for the stone, he gets ambushed by Thanos' adopted daughter Gamora and bounty hunters Rocket and Groot, who are also after the stone. In a race against time, he forms a group of these outcasts and together they must stop Ronan the Accuser from wielding the Infinity Stone. Up next, just a few months after the original, the Guardians are back on the big screen in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Peter Quill is falling deeper in love with Gamora, and also he is forced to confront the unknowns of his past when he comes face to face with a godlike entity known as Ego, played by Kurt Russell. While back on Earth, the Avengers reunite in Avengers Age of Ultron to confront a mistake created by Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, the AI known as Ultron. voiced by James Spader. If a single robotic version of Ultron is left standing, he can continue fighting the Avengers. And so, the heroes must work together along with some new friends. The Scarlet Witch, played by Elizabeth Olsen, Quicksilver, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Vision, played by Paul Bettany, to eventually stop Ultron. Meanwhile, the Avengers were taking down Ultron. Next, we have Ant-Man. Dr. Hank Pym was busy recruiting Scott Lang, played by Paul Rudd, to be the next Ant-Man in order to stop the technology from becoming a weapon. Hank Pym's former protege has recreated the technology in the form of a yellow jacket suit, and Ant-Man must battle him and ultimately save the day on the smallest scale imaginable, literally. Now, moving on to Captain America Civil War. And even though this is a Captain America movie, it almost feels like an Avengers movie, featuring almost every single Avenger while adding two more huge names to the lineup, Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther and Tom Holland's Spider-Man. You see, after the events from Age of Ultron, the heroes are asked to refrain from doing their jobs until they are told to do so by the government in the form of a legislation known as the Sokovia Accords. Unfortunately, only half of the Avengers think that's a good idea, with Iron Man and Captain America on opposing sides. And on top of that, Captain America has to save his friend Bucky Barnes, who appears to be responsible for the bombing of a UN session. Later that same year, Natasha is on the run for breaking the Sokovia Accords that she signed in Captain America Civil War. Also, she finds out that the Red Room organization that tortured and trained her to be a Black Widow is still up and running. But with an antidote to the Black Widow mind control, she tracks down the head of the Red Room and uses the antidote to save herself and the other Black Widows. She also makes plans to rescue the rest all around the world. Now we go to our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. The wall-crawling web-slinger makes his solo debut here, where he faces off with Michael Keaton's Vulture, a construction foreman who becomes a black market weapons dealer after recovering technology from the New York City battle in the first Avengers film. In addition, Peter also deals with the usual problems associated with being a high school freshman. Moving on to the next movie, we have Doctor Strange. Dr. Stephen Strange, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, is a world-class surgeon and he knows it. He's brilliant, but he's also very arrogant and is quite unbearable to almost everyone who has to deal with him until a tragic accident takes away the use of his hands. Strange then travels the world searching for a cure that will fix his hands, and he does find an answer, but in the form of some ancient magic. Now let's move on to Black Panther. After the UN bombing in Captain America Civil War, T'Challa must return to Wakanda and become king. But upon getting there, he is confronted with the continuing policy of isolation that has helped to protect Wakanda. He also faces mistakes from his father's past in the form of Eric Killmonger, played by Michael B. Jordan. Coming up with our next movie on the list, the third solo film for the hammer-wielding god, Thor Ragnarok. In the movie, we find Thor flung across space after the death of his father Odin and the destruction of his hammer by his long-lost sister Hela. He then reunites with the Hulk, who went missing after Ultron's defeat. The two together team up alongside with Loki and Valkyrie to take on Hela. And up next on the list, while all that is taking place, Scott Lang is back in Ant-Man and the Wasp, but he has been placed on house arrest following his role in the Civil War and siding with Captain America. He has also been estranged from Hank Pym and Hope. but he reluctantly agrees to help them after they figure out a way that will allow Pym to be able to rescue Hope's mother from the quantum realm. And just a heads up, don't watch the post-credit scenes until you've seen Infinity War. Now, after years of orchestrating behind the scenes to find all the Infinity Stones, in Avengers Infinity War, Thanos decided to get them for himself, and only the Avengers are in his way. Almost every superhero in the MCU tried their hardest to stop Thanos from getting all the stones. To raise the stakes even further, Thanos' only reason is to seek the power of the stones in order to wipe out half of all life in the universe. Next movie on the list, we have the finale to the Infinity Saga. Here's Avengers Endgame. 5 years have passed, and the world is still trying to readjust to life after losing so much. After Thanos snapped away half of all life and completely disrupts the universe, the Avengers must try to get things right. And luckily, a slim chance emerges for them to undo it all. But before that can happen, Cap and Tony need to make peace and finally reunite the Avengers for the fight of their lives. And now we move on to the first MCU content released on Disney+. We have WandaVision. Wanda Maximoff has been one of the MCU's most tragic characters. She lost her family in a bombing which left her stranded in the rubble for days with her brother. Her brother later died during the events of Avengers Age of Ultron. She eventually found love with Vision, but was forced to kill him to prevent Thanos from getting his hands on the Mind Stone. And even after killing him, Thanos reversed time and killed Vision in front of her again. All of this has led us to WandaVision, the first real-life MCU show on Disney+, which sees Wanda take over a small New Jersey town to create a happier version of her own life. And continuing with Disney+, we have the second of Marvel's new series, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. In this series, we see Sam Wilson aka The Falcon and Bucky Barnes aka The Winter Soldier teaming up to take on a new threat in the form of a new organization called the Flag Smashers, who have somehow gotten their hands on a new type of super soldier serum like the one that turned Steve Rogers into Captain America. And if that wasn't enough, the pair also has to deal with the government's choice to wield Cap's shield, John Walker played by Wyatt Russell. And now, with all that said, let's move on to the final MCU movie in Phase 3, Spider-Man Far From Home. This is our first look at the MCU post-Infinity War, as we see everyone who was snapped by Thanos return to life 5 years later. We see Peter head to Europe on a field trip, but he's surprised by Nick Fury and Mysterio to defeat the Elementals. However, things take an unexpected turn as Peter takes on the fight of his life. Spider-Man Far From Home is set about 6 months after the blip, as it's called, aka when the Avengers brought back everyone who had been snapped. The next movie we have in this chronological order is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which is a part of the MCU's Phase 4. We see the hero Shang-Chi, who faces off against the Mandarin, the real one. Fans will also recognize the return of the fake Mandarin in Iron Man 3. This time, however, we get to meet the real deal. Plus, quite a few friendly faces along the way. Now, coming up next on the list is Eternals. And this movie really gives a first look at the MCU timeline and the evolution of human civilization. Here we see the Eternals, who were created by a Celestial to protect humans from evil beings known as the Deviants. The main part of this movie takes place about 8 months after the blip. The Eternals are living normal lives on Earth until an unexpected tragedy forces them to fight. And now, coming up next on this chronological list, we have the latest movie released by Marvel Studios, Spider-Man No Way Home. The movie picks up where the last Spider-Man film left off, with Peter being accused of murdering Mysterio while having his identity revealed to the entire world. The constant public backlash leads Peter to seek the help of Doctor Strange in the hopes that the sorcerer will be able to make it so that no one will remember he is Spider-Man. Okay, so nearing the end, we have Disney Plus's Hawkeye series, which sees the return of Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, alongside with Kate Bishop, who idolizes the Avenger and has set out to emulate his skills with the bow and arrow. Barton is in New York City for the holidays with his family when Kate Bishop gets herself into trouble that gets the attention of not only Barton but some unexpected enemies. This leaves Bishop and Barton to reluctantly team up and take care of the mess they got themselves in. And finally, at the end of this list, we have the Loki series. The reason why this is at the end of the list is because the show is about the entire MCU timeline. Loki revolves around the god of mischief escaping from the hands of the Avengers and getting caught by the Time Variance Authority, or TVA. This sends him on a mission to catch the different antagonists or variants who has been troubling the timelines. The show's ending also reveals the breaking of the timeline and the introduction of Kang the Conqueror, which are the two biggest unanswered questions going on in the MCU right now. And that's it, guys. That's the end of the video. A list of all the MCU movies and Disney Plus TV series in chronological order. But if you skip to the end to avoid all the spoilers, like I promised, here is the compiled spoiler-free list. Please remember to like and share this video with everyone, subscribe if you haven't, and ensure that you turn on notifications to see my videos first. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.